had to say something about this episode, it would be I enjoyed the conversation we had so much. And maybe more than you would expect with a topic that seems a bit abstract, right?
Yeah. It's one of those episodes that were more of an idea before, but after the conversation, I felt like we really needed to talk about this.
It was probably one of the episodes I enjoyed more.
Totally. And if you do love learning and if you do love to have impact in your programs, don't go away because this is an episode you need to listen to. Today we're talking about the learning journey of FNSP. And now this is over to you. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Over to You. Over to You is a podcast that brings you learnings, successes and highlights from the Food and Nutrition Security Program that was implemented by GIZ in Malawi in Dedza and Salima district and funded by the German Development Corporation. In today's conversation, we are looking at the learning journey of FNSP. I'm joined in today's conversation by the one and only Dr. Martina Kreis, who does not like being called doctor, by the way. She is the team leader for the Food and Nutrition Security Program under GIZ in Malawi. Welcome, Doctor. It's an honor to have you back.
Thank you, Zainab. It's an honor to be here, and I'll look forward to you not calling me doctor, but just Martina.
Thank you so much. I'm also joined by Anya Schmidt. Anya is a technical advisor for nutrition and also the focal person for gender in Food and Nutrition Security Program. Welcome, Anya. It's an honor to have you back again.
Thank you so much, Zainab. Excited to be here, joined by our Dr. Martina.
Don't make me angry.
Thank you so much. So now let's get started. Today we are looking at the learning journey. This episode specifically is looking at the learning journey that the Food and Nutrition Security Program has taken since it started implementing around 2015 to date. I just want to find out, maybe let me start with Martina, as you say I shouldn't call you doctor. Why should we discuss this learning journey today?
Yes, thank you, Zainab. And of course, the question doesn't come as a surprise. We called this episode an episode about our learning journey in FNSP. And still, I must admit, I don't find it that easy to answer your question. Why is learning important? Why are we talking about learning? I'm almost tempted to answer with the negative, like what happens if you don't learn? And I feel development cooperation is happening in many different contexts, in many different countries, funded by different donors, implemented with different agencies and NGOs. And of course, there's lots of partners involved. And let's imagine all of these things happen and they just happen without any learning going on. How would we be able to improve our approaches, improve the way we go about things.
Not reinvent the wheel.
Not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anya. Not making the same mistakes over and over again. So I feel doing development cooperation without learning would be a disaster. At the same time, let's be realistic and let's be transparent about it. Incorporating learning in development cooperation projects is not always easy because projects are not per se defined or designed in a way that they are conducive for learning. On the contrary, you could probably say if you look at the duration of most projects, they're rather short, maybe 2, 3, if they're lucky, 4 years. If you look at the kind of accountability that is put in place, where in our case at least we have a log frame, we have an objective defined, and we are accountable to our funding ministry, BMZ, about achieving those indicators, in achieving those objectives, that doesn't really help to make learning an automatism in a development cooperation project. We were lucky in many ways, and I think we were able in FNSP to really give learning the space it deserves, and that's why we felt it's a great opportunity to also have a podcast episode about it. And that's what we're here for today.
That's interesting. So what should people expect to learn from this conversation today?
I think it's much in line with what I just said. It's not easy to incorporate learning in development cooperation projects. And in some other projects, people might not find the environment as conducive as we found it. But I think it's still a necessity. And it's also very rewarding if you're able to learn from your actions. And therefore, I would hope that people who are listening today, and especially those who work in development cooperation, would find it inspiring to maybe pick certain activities here and there and say, okay, maybe my project does not last for 10 years like FNSP did, but even in the 3 years I have, I can incorporate this particular way of looking at things or this particular activity that relates to learning to do as much learning as possible in my project.
And if I may add, not only in the end of the project when you're asked to do evaluations and like you look at all the monitoring and then you're talking about the findings at the very end, but to learn from the start, to also prioritize maybe, or like think about giving learning the space for reflection. Like the time that we spend like implementing, that we are answering emails, that we are coordinating, that we are in meetings, that we like literally like running in order to achieve our outcomes and our objectives, that it's as important to pause and to reflect and to see, are we still in line with what we are doing? And is it the way that we are doing it, is it the best way to do what we are doing with the new information that we are constantly getting from all kinds of sources around us? And this, I think, can only happen when we actively think about like how and where do we incorporate the time for learning. And I think subconsciously people, like just because of the implementation, how much work it is, just don't think about.
Yeah,
And it needs a proactive
I totally
approach.
agree. Like there's so much you need to achieve. Like from the log frame as well, you also have targets that you need to, get to. It's really hard to sort of look at it and be like, okay, so can we look at this?
Because there's not even an indicator for learning in the log frame, right? There is nowhere where you say like, I'm now accountable to report to that indicator who requested me learning, or like somehow knowledge management or something, right? It's part of like how the project is designed in general, but like it's then difficult to allocate resources, allocate time, allocate staff, like in the resources to that particular indicator if it does not exist, and then say like, okay, well, we do this on top, so please take time, half a day to learn.
If I may, Zainab, I know you want to go to your next question, but if I might add to what Anya just said, because I would take it even a step further.
Okay.
Because of course, there's also something to learn when you found the perfect solution and everything just works out wonderfully. But most of the times we learn more when things are not going exactly the way we intended them to go, right? And when maybe there's struggles, there's challenges, maybe even failures. But again, do we feel invited to be open to the things that do not work as intended? Do we take not only the time, but do we also bring the open mind to say, okay, let's look into the things that we know we could probably be doing better if only we learned from how things are going just now. And again, that's something that takes courage, especially seeing that we have funding from an external party, right? We are using funds that are meant to achieve a certain impact. And as Anya rightfully said, usually learning is not incorporated in our indicators. It's not one of our objectives. And still resources need to go into that. And I think that's maybe another good objective for this podcast episode, to make it very clear to everyone working in development cooperation that there is great impact in learning. Like if we're able to improve what we are doing because we're properly learning, then that's also good value for money. That's a good investment of our resources.
And I think to achieve that, there needs to be a bit of expectation management in the general public, also like on the government level, to not expect for every euro the perfect outcome has to be achieved, because it is not possible. Like in nowhere, not in private sector, not in the public sector, can we deliver perfect results. But what we can do is saying like, we are taking accountability for this has not worked, and we're making sure next time, because of our learning, it will work.
As they say, there's always room for improvement. So it's also good to always keep that in mind. So
sorry to be adding again.
No, please.
No, but I like the conversation. And you could become almost philosophical about it by saying, in development cooperation, we are trying to induce change, right? We are taking a given system and we are trying to induce positive change into that system. But how can you expect to introduce change and then not having to adapt your strategy? As soon as the system starts changing, we need to change what we are doing, right? So the whole idea of we come up with an objective, we come up with indicators, we have a strategy of how to achieve that, and then we just follow through without ever checking on whether there's adaptation needed, whether we need to learn up to now and then see how we continue is actually, it's not
Yeah.
smart thinking.
Yeah, I
if you're
totally
asking.
agree.
Almost
I totally agree.
fahrlässig. I don't know how you say this in English, but like...
Yeah, I feel that we're losing a huge opportunity if we leave out the learning.
So when I look at the structure of, not the structure of FNSP as such, but then how maybe knowledge was managed, or maybe the intentionality that you have put into getting this done, I sort of see categories. Like there's an element of, knowledge management and maybe knowledge resources. Because I had a conversation before with other colleagues who were talking about how you're making sure this is, well captured and the resources are available. There's also an area of collaboration. I see that a component of organization in terms of the learning part. There's also an issue of learning and adaptation, but also maybe basically just legacy of the project. So that's how I'm sort of seeing the FNSP maybe outlook on the learning. But then I want to start with the coordination and organization. One of the key elements of FNSP's success from how I've been able to interact with the project has been its well-structured coordination effort, especially on how you've been working with partners and everybody else. I want to know, maybe I should start with you, Martina. How was this stage reached? And maybe if you could explain a bit, maybe if you had specific strategies that you'd share with us.
I think the most important word you mentioned now in your question was intentionality.
Yes.
So being intentional about learning, and I think that's probably the most important. I would agree. We do have structures established in FNSP that are hopefully, or I would assume they are conducive for learning. But I would say more than that, or it is more important that you go about this intentionally than it is important what kind of structures you put in place. But what we did as a team is we said, okay, we want to be a learning project, a learning team. What kind of structure would best enable us to be that kind of team? And we had a learning workshop and we developed a learning strategy. And we took, I think it was a 3-day workshop that we had.
I think it was even 4 days.
Or was it 4 days?
Oh, wow.
Because we included our implementing
Yes.
partners in the last day.
True. So you see, there is that time investment that goes with it, because you tell the team that they need to leave everything else for 4 days and just focus on something that is not directly related to their day-to-day
That's a
work.
huge investment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not everyone will be happy about
True.
going for a workshop that long, but we did that. And one of the outcomes from that learning workshop was that we established what we call subgroups, thematic subgroups.
Okay.
And they were very, like the organization of these was very much need-based. If people felt we have a topic or we have an area of work that requires different people of the team to regularly come together and share information, exchange on what has been happening, then we said, okay, it seems we need a subgroup on...
Yeah.
We have one on access and availability to food. We have one on gender. We have one on governance. They worked very differently, and not all of them worked well. But I dare say the fact that we established these really enabled team members to have a much more in-depth exchange on topics and to take ownership for an area of work. And then taking ownership comes with taking responsibility and really defining the type of work that needs to be done.
Maybe before you move on to like how we then combine those subgroups,
Yes.
is we found before we reached that conclusion to do subgroups that the whole team was always there for all the information, which was kind of a very inefficient way of like learning, because not every information has to be with all the team members at all times and in all depths, right? Like some, it's enough to be informed about it. Some really have to technically work on this because this is what their position requires. So we try to also be time efficient and like efficient with our resources that we have, so that the burden of constant exchange and constant learning is taken away from people, or like put on people where it matters the most. And I think this is what the subgroups have like really helped with, to kind of help people focus in their priority areas, to not be constantly overwhelmed with information and processing, and everybody has to do exactly the same thing, because
We were trying to move away from the team leader being the bottleneck. Yeah, because we were very centralized, and I think many project teams are, right?
Yes,
so you
yes.
always have that one person. Sometimes it's a component leader, sometimes it's the overall team lead, and they have to decide everything, and everything has to go through their desk. And it makes that individual a bottleneck. And I don't like being a bottleneck.
especially for such a big program.
Yeah, I don't like keeping people back, right? When I feel they are ready to move on and to get work done. So by establishing the subgroups, we made sure that we have more of a star-like structure, where the subgroups were quite independently working on issues. Of course, for certain approvals, the team leader or component leader is still needed. That goes without saying. But still, I think it made us more agile also. And then the other thing that I remember came out from that learning strategy workshop was, and that goes back to being intentional about learning. We were unhappy with how many of our meetings stopped at the level of exchanging information. This happened and we did that and this is going on and there will be an activity around this. And maybe also with identifying challenges. Yeah, this didn't work. Or our implementing partner reported an issue there. But then we were like, so what? Exactly.
Now time's over. We need to go on to our other meetings. So like,
over. Thank you very much. Everyone goes back to their desks. But then what happens? What's next?
True.
So we created a new meeting format and we called that follow-through meeting.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we wanted to make sure we follow through. Like on any issue that was identified. We will not leave this room until we feel like we have identified a solution, the next action points, the next steps to be taken. I think that was also an important change.
Because it was a standing meeting. So everybody had this in their calendar.
I totally like that one. Because you're like being accountable as well to seeing the end of the problems you're identifying. That's really
And it also helps the person who identified or who was responsible to share that information to not left hanging. But it's like, okay, I will have a space where I can bring this forward and we will not leave that meeting before I know what I do next or like what the next steps are and who will maybe also support me in this, right? Because we are still a team and it was quite important for us to not say like, oh, just because we assigned this assignment now to this person, to this subgroup that everybody else is like, okay, I'm out. I'm not thinking about this anymore. But like still having the opportunity like to support each other as a team, to sign up for support.
You now just covered my next question because I wanted to find out like, how did this actually help ensure better coordination and, collaboration probably within FNSP? But I think from the way you've explained, that's something that I've already picked from the conversation.
Yeah, but what is important to note is I think it was very crucial also to keep our implementing partners involved. So again, a change that I feel was a very beneficial one was we've always, like as long as I've been part of the project, there were bilateral meetings, regular bilateral meetings between the implementing partners and the FNSP team, just to check on progress in implementation, pick up on issues that were maybe raised in the reporting, whatever. But then at one point we said, is it enough to just have bilateral meetings? The two implementing partners, so CARE in Salima and Self-Help Africa in Dedza, are doing very similar interventions. How come they are not learning from each other? How come we are not bringing them together to learn about each other's interventions? So we added trilateral meetings to the bilateral ones and actually then had a format where in one day we would be having a bilateral meeting with CARE, then Self-Help Africa would join, we would have a trilateral meeting, and then CARE would eventually say goodbye and we would continue with a bilateral meeting with Self-Help Africa. That was again a very conducive format, I feel. We've just concluded last week, and I was not around, and I'm really sad I missed it, but we had the last trilateral meeting, the closing meeting with our implementing partners,
Interesting.
But if I may add, maybe it answers another question. I'm anticipating another question. But this was one way of exchanging information and learning together with our implementing partners. But then, and this was quite soon after I joined here in Malawi, also on request of the implementing partners, there was like, we need to come together for learning. Because a lot of people probably know that feelings like there's a study made here, there's a report written there, it looks great. We open the drawer, we put it in, we will look at it later, and then it does not happen in the midst of implementation.
That's true.
So, and this is also when it's like, we need to be more intentional. There has been this study published, there has been this report published. Can we come together and talk about these topics? So this is how the format of, and we called this learning series, was born. Basically,
we actually have to give credit to Self-Help Africa, or at the time it was still called United Purpose. And it was Olivia Jaggett who who also came up with the term, I believe.
I think so. Yeah. And then, and I was there in FNSP, like GIZ FNSP was like, Anya, can you take that up? It's like, okay, then let's start with the first session. I remember the first session was food safety, because just before that, the food safety report was published for FNSP, and we decided like, okay, then let's come together, all implementing partners, government partners, and the expert who wrote that report and did that presentation, for us to have a discussion, to look at the learnings, and if we have to adapt our implementation. And that was the important key, to not just leave it again with the exchange, but then like, what does this mean for FNSP? And like this learning series that was comprised of several learning events in different formats. Sometimes it was 1 day, sometimes it was actually 2 days.
Oh, wow.
We have tried to, every time when there was a study coming out, or when we saw through regular monitoring, that is an issue we should take time to talk about and to find a solution. We organized a learning event together with the implementing partners, and wherever possible invited government partners and experts. And I think our kind of star event kind of was the second learning event 3 years ago about our livestock approach, where because there was a livestock study that was looking quite critically, is the pass-on scheme and everything working? And we came together with a livestock expert and actually jointly reflected on like, why are we doing livestock? We jointly agreed what the main goal of our livestock approach is. Is it resilience? Is it dietary diversity? Is it food security? We jointly decided on that. So, and with this kind of joint understanding, we could move forward saying, now with the support of the expert, like, how can we now design a livestock approach that most likely has way more impact than what happened so far? And I think it had a very long reach, but this was the first event to have like kickstarted that. And I think, for us, this, like, especially also for me, this was a very important one because it really showcased like how important it is to stop, to reflect, to get knowledge through a study and through experts to adapt implementation.
And it makes me, sorry, I'm also smiling. It makes me smile because that event, that learning event on livestock was where I became the goat lady. I'm not known as the goat lady now.
Oh, wow.
Because FNSP used to also invest in goats, and we had a goat pass-on scheme, and I know our implementing partners were very fond of the goats, but not only implementing partners, also beneficiaries, political partners, even project members themselves. And in that learning event, and that's what I mean with follow through, I repeatedly asked the question, can you prove to me how goats increase dietary diversity of women and children? Because that's our objective. And if we cannot provide proof how a goat that I give to household X will improve the dietary diversity of the mother of that household, of the children of that household, then why would we invest in goats?
Exactly.
And people were winding and wiggling, but it's important for resilience, and but still...
But resilience is not about dietary diversity.
And
that's a component of, financial strength and whatever.
And I must have been convincing, because at the end of that meeting, as Anya said, there was consensus that for FNSP, it does indeed not make sense to continue investing in goats. Wow. And it was hard to let go of the goats. I appreciate that everyone cried for the goats. Wow. But we let go of them. And it was because of that learning event.
Yeah, so we are letting go of goats and bringing in local chickens because we love learning and seeing what is really working. And honestly speaking, when you talk about the goats, when I had the session with Chisomo and Felice, she actually mentioned the learning event, and they were like, it was really not making sense because you can't expect a household that really survives barely to slaughter a goat for, dietary diversity. It doesn't happen. Exactly. Literally, it does not happen that easily unless it's sick. In most cases, which they sell, actually. So it's really nice that you got crowned the God Lady. But at the end of the day, we got to see, impact. In case you're just joining, this is Over to You podcast. And in today's conversation, we are looking at learning. Are you learning in your projects? Are you learning in the things that you're implementing? Today, we are looking at how FNSP was learning from its project to adapt, to make sure that we get to a point where we can say, this is, I think, a good space to be. And today's conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Martina Kreis and Anya Schmidt. They are both from the GIZ, Food and Nutrition Security Program, a program funded by the German Development Corporation. We still have so much to talk about. Keep listening. Now, before I go to the learning and adaptation section, what role do you think this, structure that we put, just forgotten the name we mentioned, the follow-through, the subgroups.
Follow-through meetings.
Yes. What role do you think they played in fostering collaboration, number one, and also in ensuring that the work that was being done remained on track and it was improved?
Fostering collaboration, then we maybe need to look within FNSP
Yes.
and FNSP with implementing. So these are the two different things. Looking within FNSP, it fosters collaboration between the team members working on a certain topic. And for the whole team knowing, if I have an issue, if I read something here, if somebody approached me with this, and I, for example, did not have an answer because I'm not working on this, I knew I can give it into the subgroup. I don't only give it to one person and like put the burden on this one person to somehow answer, and like if this falls through the crack, then nobody hears about it again, but to give it into a group to discuss. I think that was very important to again be smart with our resources, like time and stuff.
Yes.
But also to have a space to discuss new topics that have been brought in. So I think the collaboration there was pretty good. Also coming together, saying like a subgroup has a topic, wants to bring it to the wider audience in the team. We're using the follow-through meeting to come together to discuss this, so everybody felt involved and still had like an overall knowledge. Okay, where's this huge program that we are having going to? And then it helped also in being quite clear who's responsible for what, and then to communicate this to implementing partners. So for example, we talk about livestock, so please talk to Kate or Chisomo, and they will then make sure they bring it into the subgroup. For example, like, or gender will be Kate or Anya, so these two, and we are responsible to then share later with our team whatever we say, like this is important for the team. And I think this facilitated also like the collaboration with the implementing partners for them to know like who's the focal point for what topic.
For me, it's just like beyond creative, because we create groups a lot. I mean, I'm speaking from experience of being Malawian. We love groups and we love committees and what have you. But I think there was so much, as Martina kept repeating the word I said, intentionality in making sure that they are really functional. And they're also actually bringing out what you really want to see at the end of the day. So I think for me, that's really one of the takeaways that our listener could actually pick from the conversation and see how best they can maybe adapt this into their programming.
I would also say the groups were established, but they were not very formal. And I think maybe that was also one of the success factors. It was very organic.
Okay.
Some groups were established and they never really came to life. Maybe people showed an interest in the beginning, but then it died down very quickly. And we didn't insist. We didn't say, no, the group is established. Now you need to meet regularly and we want minutes and we want to see that something has been done. But the groups really went to where the energy is.
Okay.
And if there was no energy and there was no reason to create energy for it, then we also left it there. I think that's important. So that was agile and adaptive in itself.
Oh, interesting. Now, you mentioned adaptive. We are going to the second section, which is learning and adaptation for me. I just want to find out what have been some of the most important learnings during the FNSP journey. I know you mentioned some of them, especially in terms of what worked well and what did not.
I mean, we've mentioned the local chicken. I think that's one of the stories that I also like to bring forward. But there's others. And you've already touched also on the topic of food safety. And maybe food safety is an interesting example because it's much related to a principle that's very dear also to our funding ministry, to BMZ, which is do no harm. So, and I said in the beginning, we induce changes. And with any change induced, you can't be 100% certain that the change is not also going to be negative in some ways. And when it came to food safety, if you really look at what FNSP was trying to do at the time, we had to ask ourselves the question, are we not potentially also doing harm? Like one of the interventions that we focused on was weaning foods and how to make them more diverse and how to improve the nutritional quality of weaning foods. And we partly did so by promoting groundnuts as one ingredient. Can women not include groundnut powder into their porridges, for example? Now, if you know groundnuts, I'm not sure whether you know, but groundnuts are often heavily affected with mycotoxins. So there's molds growing on the groundnuts and they leave that invisible, not tasting but very, very poisonous, toxic substance. And that's the last thing we want to give to small children. All of a sudden, we were asking ourselves, by promoting groundnuts as part of weaning foods, are we potentially doing harm to these children? Interestingly, the exposure to some of these mycotoxins is one of the contributing factors to stunting. With the weaning foods, we are trying to get the nutrition improved and to combat stunting. But if it was the case that we would be exposing these kids to aflatoxins, we might be doing the opposite and even increase their stunting. So it was really important to make sure we are not doing harm there. And that's where the whole food safety work started. So we said, okay, we need to look into this. We can't just let it go. We can't just close our eyes to the potential risk of having these kids consume more aflatoxins than necessary.
I think the aflatoxin conversation, I know about it. I mean, I love reading too much, so I've read it about it. But I think to look at what else I didn't know about the stunting. I just know it's poisonous. But I also know in the villages, a lot of people actually just disregard that. You just like, no, it will be mixed with the other good one and it will be fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
So from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying, actually the component of food safety came in while the project was already being implemented.
Absolutely. It was part of our learning. It was saying, okay, we can't just continue with the intervention with disregarding this potential risk. Let's learn from what we have just been aware of and then see how we continue.
Yeah, and how maybe safely introduce groundnuts into learning. So what are the techniques? So we got an expert involved to help us with that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the expert looked actually at two different things. First, can we reduce the risk of contamination? But secondly, also, could the groundnut potentially be replaced with another high protein, high fat product, like different legumes, for example, to have the same positive effect on the nutrition value of the porridges without the risk of exposure to mycotoxins.
I know I'll have a good time when I'm having that conversation because it will be coming shortly after, I think, this one.
I know.
So I'm looking forward to the food safety component and the conversation.
You should. It's an interesting topic, indeed.
Yeah. So if you were to start the program again, what do you think you would have done differently in terms of approach, strategy, or maybe coordination as FNSP? Let's reset like we're in 2015 and we're restarting. What would you do different?
That's a good question, but not an easy one. Actually, I'm realizing now we've been doing all this talking already without me even mentioning once that one of the most important factors that contributed to FNSP being able to learn was the fact that we are part of a global program. So we're not a standalone. We belong to this bigger effort where we have a common objective, a joint log frame, and then different projects in different countries that all contribute to that overall objective, which is the same across all countries, and also very similar log frames, very similar indicators. And whoever was part at the time to design the global program, I think did a very good job by already focusing on nutrition, focusing on the first 1,000 days that the Sun movement defined. So all that was very well done. But I know, and many people in GIZ who have been part of the design process at the time will now, I see them nodding in front of my inner eye if they listen to this. One thing that we all regret is that when the log frame was defined, we left out stunting as an outcome indicator. I think the indicators that were chosen are very good ones, and many of them are internationally validated, like the minimum dietary diversity score for women, the food insecurity experience scale. Many of them, or at least the food insecurity experience scale, for example, is used as an SDG indicator. So these are really high standard, scientifically internationally validated indicators. But stunting would have been the gold standard. And stunting was left out because at the point in time the program was designed, it was expected to be a 3-year program. Okay. And everyone said, well, within 3 years you will not see impact on stunting.
Sure. And now look where we are.
And now, 10 years down the line, we go like, why did we miss that opportunity?
Yeah.
And I think had we introduced stunting from the beginning, it would be great now to see or not see the effect on stunting. And I think our learning reach even beyond what we see now.
Can you maybe share an example of a learning from FNSP that led to like a significant change or improvement in the way the program was implemented? Maybe in governance, maybe in the community-based nutrition outcomes, and anything else, maybe in mainstreaming, anything.
Apart from the livestock approach.
Yeah, anything. It could be that as well.
I have two examples, actually. I'm looking at my piece of paper here. So what I would also consider learning, and I think that's something we mentioned in the podcast with Felix Peary, our former director of nutrition, was when we started the collaboration with yet another implementing partner, which is Oxfam.
Yes.
And Oxfam was tasked with advocating for finance for nutrition in the Malawi context. And in the beginning, Department of Nutrition and also Felix as a person was not amused.
Yeah.
Right? He was like, you're messing with government topics here. And you shouldn't be making our lives more difficult. And we had Oxfam saying, yeah, but we are an NGO. It's our job to do that. So I think, again, looking at the situation, we could have just closed our eyes to the fact that we created a situation of conflict, really, when all we wanted was to move forward with an agenda. We decided not to close our eyes to it, but to learn from the situation. And we had a mediation meeting between FNSP with Department of Nutrition and Oxfam colleagues. And I would say the conversation was a very engaged one, but it was in particular one that led to a common understanding and for everyone to be clear about their roles and for everyone to agree that ultimately we are all trying to achieve the same objective. So let's join forces with the differences that we have and let's make sure we work together as much as we can while still acknowledging that we might not always be happy about the way the other approaches the issue. For me, that was learning because it meant going to the meta level. Yeah. It means it's not always sufficient to just stay at the technical level and say, yes, but you have a task to conclude with. Don't worry about anything else. You have to address relationships. You have to address the overall setup. You have to work within the system. I think that was an eye-opener for many of the team members at the time, and hopefully also on the side of the other partners who were involved in that kind of learning.
Yeah, true.
And I think also another example, and this is also more on a structure level, but for learning, you need to have a conducive environment for learning. Martina, as a team leader, allowed very much space for learning. We were allowed to take 4 days to figure out how we learn and not necessarily right now pursue our outputs, but see the mid and long-term benefit of using this 4 days that will impact our outputs in a positive way. And I think for me also as an employee and as someone working in development, to be very intentional and conscious about learning and that it has to be a part and that it also means learning from mistakes, saying not coming from a place, oh God, I did a mistake. Now everything is gone down the drain. That's it. I have to justify this somehow to the ministry. We will maybe lose funding, but okay, yes, this did not work. There are reasons why it did not work. And let's look at how it can work next time. I think that is very important to kind of think about what kind of environment, as a team leader, but also as a team member, do I want to give people and want to give myself for learning and reflection and for adaptation. And it's not always easy. I think time is tight and expectations, as I mentioned before, are high, that things have to work, they have to work. You basically are not allowed to mistakes because then somewhere the money is somewhere and you did not do well. But we are all humans and we are learning, especially from our mistakes or from things that did not go as intended. But then we have a chance to make that better and even better than before. And I think that is for me.
It's also good for leadership to be very helpful so that learning should be really conducive. Because Martina said, I'm not sure if you remember, she said she doesn't like to be a bottleneck. She was just saying it in the context, but for me, that translates to she creates an environment for her team to be able to express themselves, to be able to bring out issues so they can sit down and talk. So if you're listening and you're in a leadership position, please do not be a bottleneck to your team. We want them to learn. And if you're just joining us, this is Over to You podcast. In today's conversation, we are looking at how FNSP was learning throughout its implementation period to adapt and see what's working, what's not working, and how best best the project can actually achieve its outcomes. I'm joined in today's conversation by Dr. Martina Kress, the team leader for the Food and Nutrition Security Program, as well as Anya Schmidt, who is the technical nutrition advisor, as well as a gender focal person for the FNSP in Malawi. The FNSP program is actually funded by the German Development Corporation. So keep listening because there's still some information that you need to learn from our conversation. Now, I want to go to, we've been talking about learning, adapting. We need to have knowledge products, people which we can actually refer to and say, okay, so this is, what we've been able to produce as part of our learning journey. What knowledge products have been produced during the FNSP implementation phase, and how have they been made available? And maybe which partners is, in charge of managing them for the sake of other people's, access?
Well, I can say you're just listening to one.
I like that one.
That was a very low-hanging fruit, I think. I start with the podcast,
Yes.
with which we hope that our learnings and our impressions became a voice, and a voice that can be heard everywhere on the way to work, during work, home, or even together with a family, or for development practitioners, but also researchers, private businesses, to follow us and to see what we have done, and to also give the chance to share what we have done. So somebody else who thinks about what kind of livestock approach can we do, how have others done it, they can listen to some examples. So to make that product available to a wider audience, especially when you have access to internet, you will be able to access this quite fast. It's the availability of it.
Accessibility was one reason, but I was one of the biggest fans of the idea to develop a podcast. Just to let you know, Zainab.
Oh, thank you very much.
No, my reason being that we realized when we started to think more seriously about how to document knowledge products. If you write things down, first it's a lot of effort to write. It's also a lot of effort to read, but also you lose a lot of the interesting information as soon as you put things in writing.
Yeah.
Like what is easily being said and told as a story and narrated just loses that.
Yeah, in the current voice, we would say vibe.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult to transport everything from a story as soon as you write it down. So we felt podcast, something audio, is maybe a better vehicle to transport some of the, including emotions that we have about the work that FNSP was able to do.
Especially enthusiasm.
Oh, thank you very much.
In FNSP, we don't have a lack of enthusiasm for our topics that we are working on, and I think,
Yeah, actually, I think I also had a conversation with, was it Chisomo? When I was asking about sustainability, and they're also talking about, it's more of a video guide that they're creating. Is it a video guide or something?
Instructional videos?
Yeah, instructional videos. I found that to be a unique, actually, component of a knowledge product, because it's often people write books, and then, as you said, Anya, they just sit in a drawer, sitting pretty there, and you forget about it, it gathers dust. But a video is really hard to ignore. You'll literally be forced to watch it. And for me, I think that's also something that I felt this is a unique knowledge product that FNSP is going to leave.
That's a second good example.
Yes.
And I think Rachel and also Chisomo are in the field now.
As we speak.
To do the filming of some of these instructional videos. And again, it's easily said and then not so easily done, because most people, when they hear video, and that includes video producers, they think of the typical kind of image video that most development projects would ask them to make. And in our case, that's not what we were asking for. We wanted instructional videos that really show step by step how to practically do something, how to make manure at the homestead, how to produce chicken feed or mix the chicken feed for your local chicken, these kind of things. And really teaching videos, instructional videos, as we said. So that would be a second knowledge product. Sorry, Anya.
I have a third.
Yes.
And maybe it also goes to the philosophical level again, but a knowledge product in itself were the learning events of the learning series. And our latest animal-sourced food event that we did on a national level, because the product for me, like when I think about it, can also be a process.
Yeah.
Can also be an experience, because all the people who have experienced this learning event, experienced this that workshop, have contribute to something later. So that is the product in itself to be part of that, because you will not be able to take away that from a person, what he or she has learned during this kind of event, or like what he has gotten from it, the connection,
having inspired someone,
the network that has been made, the fact that government implementing partners sit together in a big room and discussing like innovative issues about livestock, for example, the fact that they have talked and seen each other may lead to a phone call next week saying like, we have talked about this last week, can we talk about it again, or can we meet for a meeting? That in itself was a learning and knowledge product, this event in itself. So I think what I would like to encourage people to reflect on, does it always have to be a product as in a piece of paper, as in a podcast episode, or as in a video, or can the product also be the experience itself, the event itself?
That's really a good point to make, Anya, because how do we want people to see what we're doing is also a very important question. And, you know, when you think classically, it's the reason people are not learning. I just want to ask now on FNSP, let's say, we are phasing out. You've developed all these products, and somebody else is listening to this podcast and they're like, I really want to know how to make those, the instruction videos. How can I have access to them? Where can they go and find this information, these knowledge products that you've made?
We're making them accessible on platforms that we don't own, but that are hopefully widely known to those people for whom these knowledge products are relevant. For example, the instructional videos will be published on maybe both, but at least one of the two platforms, either Access Agriculture or AgTube. So these are run by other organizations. I know they partly receive funding also from BMZ, but their funding is broader than that. And the whole idea is to make all kinds of agriculture-related instructions available in local languages. So they also make an effort to translate these into all kinds of local languages to extension service officers who can then, again, we don't expect a farmer necessarily to have their own smartphone, phone, but we would hope that the extension officer has one and can stand with the agriculture person, with the farmer by their field and actually watch such an instructional video while they're in the field.
And it's actually timeless, yeah? That's a good part of it. It's really timeless. You can go back to refer, at any point in time.
I think a lot of people, especially now in development, will think like, but this is exactly that. Where do we put our knowledge products? Because oftentimes when you say like, oh, I'm creating a homepage, who's paying for that homepage after the project is done?
Exactly.
Right? Like, how do we identify places where this knowledge product will be? But then maybe we say like, oh, we put it on the web page here of the political partner there, but who is then maintaining that? Who is updating this information? And I think this is also a current challenge that we are still working on and trying to find the best solution. But this is also like what I have to look more into. But in general, I think the development world has to think about like, where can we make this available so people can actually find it and access it, right? And like, who is then paying for it? Can there be like an overall funding for knowledge products, for example? Just throwing this idea out while I'm speaking. But I think that is a big question that a lot of people ask themselves, because latest when they're coming to an end with their project and they have to desire to leave something behind, or to leave knowledge that they gained and learnings to leave the people, and want to make sure that it is being used so the wheel is not reinvented, they face the struggle of like where to put it.
Yeah, so that the legacy continues. I think that's a really good point. Not just, funders, but even political partners need to take into consideration as well. I feel like most political partners are very good at papers and writing content and documents and what have you. It's really time to sort of look into what's really working now. What are more people, looking at and reading and watching and what have you? It's really nice to bring it into perspective, like how can we access this when we are gone, because the funds are not there anymore to maintain a website, to pay for subscription here. It's really an important aspect to look at.
But this podcast will be there.
No, this one cannot go. We are accepting, no, this one cannot go. It has to be here because we need more people to be able to listen to our conversations. Please, there's so much that people need to learn from us.
But this is like literally what brings you to the point when you ask yourself, how do people learn? how do people access information, and that looks very different from somebody who sits in a very local place and does not have internet all the time, right? To somebody who sits somewhere in a big city, say like, oh, I can go to the library, I can go to there, I can even go to the cinema where I can see movies, I can, you know, like it really depends on the context where you are, where you say like, how do people learn, and what are they like barriers and enablers to learn?
Which I think FNSP has also tried to address by also including the extension workers and the localizing the languages into. That's also something I think you should, you know, pat yourself on the back for, because that's really considerate of every potential aspect of the reader.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Zainab. I wish I could fully agree. I feel we've been late. We've been waking up to the call really late, and I'm very thankful to our development advisors, Sabrina and Barbara, who brought it to our attention that especially at district level, we can take it to a different level by deliberately supporting them with their knowledge management and learning. And we are doing that now in the very last few months of FNSP. We have provided some IT equipment for the districts to be able to do simple things like information management. Where do we store files? And it will always stick in my mind how one of the development advisors described to me how things are usually handled. So when you develop a proposal, for example, for a donor to fund, you have that document and you share it via email, and it's in different inboxes of different people, but let these people move somewhere else, then no one has the file. It's gone. Exactly. It disappears. And that is not conducive for learning. So hopefully the little support we were able to provide at district level, people will be able to have their own data well organized and then build on that every time they encounter a similar process in future.
Well, they say better late than never. So, so what advice and maybe insights would you give to new teams? Because you've talked a lot about maybe the what ifs. If we had time, if we could restart. But let's say maybe a listener right now is part of a team that's really just getting started, or maybe a project that's just starting. From your experience of FNSP, what insights would you share?
A lot has been said also by you, Anya, in the beginning. Let's be intentional and let's provide resources. And the two go together very much, right? If we put aside time, like have regular formats that we dedicate to learning. If we say there's a budget for us to develop these kind of knowledge products. For videos, most likely you will need to contract someone to do the video for you. To do a podcast, you need someone hosting it and having a studio where it can be recorded, right? It requires resources. I would say that's something that needs to be budgeted in from the beginning. But then, and that has also been mentioned, it's about mindsets and being open to the idea of learning from mistakes, being open to the idea that not everything has been designed perfectly from the beginning. And maybe combined with the idea of let's take it to the very end. Let's follow through. Let's not leave it hanging somewhere, but let's be real about what we are trying to achieve here.
And let's take learning not as a burden. I was like, oh God, but like this is just taking my time. But let's take it as an opportunity to, while you're implementing, while you're doing what you're doing, to make it even better.
Thank you very much. Now, what systems and processes have been put in place to ensure that the learnings from FNSP, I know we talked about that a lot, from FNSP are carried forward to future projects, especially the ones on food and nutrition work in general?
I would take that question now more geared to GIZ projects, because we've talked a little bit about how we're trying to make the knowledge accessible within Malawi, for example, or within the development community. Within GIZ, we have a technical department that also holds the mandate for doing knowledge management. And over the last years, they have really improved on systematically organizing knowledge products on different platforms. We have a platform called Topics. That's where they will make sure we upload all documents that are of relevance for future projects. And I think that's one of the main things. But then again, as Anya also previously said already, it's a lot about interacting with colleagues. So in that technical department, we have what we call planning officers. And planning officers are usually the ones in charge when it's about designing a new program. So the more we share our knowledge and our experiences with planning officers in the technical department, proactively, the more likely they will incorporate these learnings when they are actually in the process of designing something new.
Also, what systems processes, and this is a bit apart from the programs, but it is the sector network for rural development, where I'm a co-speaker for the working group for food and nutrition security. There are several other working groups as well, like for example on gender, on digital transformation, on agriculture and climate and stuff. What we have done, we have made use of that additional platform that is somewhat linked to between GIZ and BMZ to bring topics from Malawi, learnings from Malawi to other countries.
Wow.
There's also like regular conferences are taking place. Like next year will be another conference in Zambia where people from all areas, not just nutrition, are coming together and exchanging and meeting and like inviting political partners, inviting other partners to discuss like state-of-the-art topics that are right now relevant in the development sector, in the rural development areas. So I think reaching out also to see like what other networks are there, where can I proactively bring in what we have done, what we have learned, going just beyond our little GIZ bubble or a little development bubble in Malawi to look as like, hey, I have seen a paper from that researcher, hashtag Patrick Webb, and like nutrition baseline study that Martina has started saying like, hey, this researcher has published something. Why can we not just reach out and see like, what has he done on this? Is this relevant for Malawi? And right now we're in the process of writing a nutrition baseline study to see how nutrition governance impacts malnutrition. So this kind of like foresight and openness to invite different areas and different aspects into your implementation, learning from it and connecting and networking, I think that can greatly improve your work, but development work in general.
That's totally true. Now, what message would you like to leave our listeners? I know there are a lot of people who are listening, people who've got maybe power to, create programs, those who may fund, those who may just be part of the implementation team. What message would you like to leave with them on the importance specifically of coordination, learning, and adaptation in long-term programs like this one?
Shall I start?
Yeah. I also have the feeling like I just exhausted, like with my last speech, I exhausted that question already a bit. But.
No, I have a very personal message. You said before, Anya, learning is fun. And like apart from my professional approach to learning and apart from strongly believing that projects should learn, I enjoy learning as an individual. And I'm a strong believer and a big fan of lifelong learning.
You never finished.
Exactly. Learning doesn't stop when you finish school.
Yeah,
it doesn't
true.
stop when you finish university and have your profession. You should be continuing to learn as long as you live. And if you're 100 years, then there should still be something to learn for you on the last day of your life. So that's my personal message. But beyond that, I think seeing the advantage in the work we do by improving it through learning is so rewarding. It brings us closer to our purpose. It's rewarding to see impact, and impact increases as we learn along the way.
Sure.
So I think you can only win if you invest in learning and if you're open to learning. Honestly, I think the benefit is so huge. I feel it should not be an exception, or it should not be a special feature of any development project. It should be the standard, the gold standard even. I would appreciate if learning projects are the gold standard.
Wow, that's amazing. Gold standard, or maybe we could go platinum, but the point is it's really important to learn from what you're doing. Maybe, Anya, if you have a message as well?
Actually, I would like to leave it with these last words because I've said a lot to people what I would recommend. Now I see, and I think it's well summarized to say, like, let's make it the standard. Let's make it the gold standard.
Well, we hope you're also going to make learning a gold standard in your projects, because the whole purpose of the Over to You podcast is to make sure that you learn something from the way FNSP implemented its work, both from the successes, from the learnings. We don't go failure. There's no failure in project management. I always say that. There's always a learning point. So we are hoping you're getting these into your programming and making sure you're adapting and making sure that you are impacting your communities in the best way possible. This has been Over to You podcast, and in today's conversation, we were looking at how the Food and Nutrition Security Program learned from its own programming and adapted so that it can have better outcomes. Today, I was joined by Dr. Martina Kreis, the team leader for the Food and Nutrition Security Program under GIZ in Malawi, as well as Anya Schmidt, the Technical Nutrition Advisor and Gender Focal Person for GIZ Food and Nutrition Security Program. And this program is funded by the German Development Corporation. I've been your usual host, Zainab Jisenga, and until the next one, this is Over to You. Thanks very much for listening.